the old Silk Road, which has run for centuries, enabling trade and the sharing of ideas and art from the east to the west, and the west to the east. Right now in Kashmir, it is a line of control that separates Hindu India from Muslim Pakistan. And so there are periods of growth there, of no conflict, of maybe not people crossing that line to get together, but still of living in a kind of agreed upon calmness. And then there are periods when there's shelling, when there's IEDs, EFPs. In this poem, I tried to think about all of that. The Silk Road and the Scythe. Beyond the tumbled red marble of temple, pavilion, and palace. Beyond the skeleton of a heronry once blazoned with plumed crest and wing. Beyond a woman's bathhouse, roofless, its corridors busied with bloom, is a vast commonplace orchard, apples rotting in amaranth's bronze. After the scythe passed through, vegetable ruin. Seeds gone wild so long they resist cultivation, the tangly end of an era of elaboration, epic and sugary before it fell. Peshawar, Lahore, Kashmir, Shalimar. Amid the glamour of dominion and the spangle of arms, that ascetic, the scythe, blue and notched as if counting with a stroke so severe it is tender, takes down to the root the theatrical side of mankind. In its swath, someone will glean the remains, a few grains too scant for even half a loaf. If she can muster the spit, maybe enough for a palm's breadth of flatbread, maybe a pasty gruel. So there we have the bloom of the orchards. We have the amaranth growing so crazily it can hardly be harvested. And we have the poverty. And this really is the earth right now.
And it's called Lament. Beautiful daughter, curse our bones, so dear, so dear, men have slayed us for 2 teeth, their white treasure. Only you survived, last of 9 I bore, tusk deprived, lone cripple of our tribe. Was nakedness your shield, your handicap a gift? Savannah, grassland paradise, killing fields, lost Eden, elephantine epitaph, death hides everywhere. Mother, they burned your holy bones. Slaughter or sacrilege. Curse this Hobson's choice, devil's bargain for our lives. Mother, see my toothless children, your glory gone. I give birth all mutants. Damn all men, curse my ugliness. They have outlasted disasters, natural and man-made, hurricanes, tsunamis, mudslides, school shootings, bombings. After 9/11, a pear tree was pulled from the rubble of the Twin Towers and replanted. An American elm was rescued after the Oklahoma City bombing, and the witness trees of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Trees that survived atomic bomb blasts. In Japan, they call the people that survived the Hiroku, and they have a name for the trees that survived, the Hiroku Jumoku. So Mary Beth Holloman wrote about one of those trees, a ginkgo that was planted in 1740 in a garden called Sukien. And she wrote, reading this very powerful persona poem made me want to be a tree tonight and channel their voices here in this room. So this poem is called Suke and Ginkgo Speaks, a Hyben. When the black rains end, when the bloodless bodies we buried on earth, in earth, when the poisons filter down into the dark and fertile soil, when the troops turn to stone, we will still be here. We who withstood heat 40 times stronger than the sun, who have existed since before the dinosaurs, who you call living fossils, oldest of trees, last of our kind. We who budded new green fists within the year of your blast. We remain. You who once saved our kind, who value our tenacity to grow in your concrete worlds and clean your sooted air. You who still lean against our trunks and dream what you could be. You and we are linked in our survival. We will not forsake you. We draw power from deeper than you bury your war heroes, deeper than your shrapnel will ever lodge. We stand undeterred by our many wounds, phoenixed from the ashes of your fears, phlegm finding roots to rise around charred trunks and blasted limbs. Listen, we speak to you of endurance, voices in concert with winds. We remind you that only in coexistence will you survive. We tell you that your suffering arises from your confusion over superiority. Superiority is always with those who branch broader into multiplicity. Listen, venerate those charred trunks. See how our golden halo falls within a day to create a mirror halo at our feet. All power resides. All life waits for you to surrender to our embrace. When the black rains end, beneath burns, spring's green fists hold fall's golden halo. Thank you.
So, and this is also related to Puerto Rico's tortured relationship with the United States as a colony. And so this piece is called Death by Empire, Vieques, Puerto Rico. The orchids of Vieques are drinking napalm, flowing up from the ground that was pounded every year by 30,000 bombs in a 900-acre living laboratory of destruction and death. The fiddler crabs scuttle in the radioactive water seeping out of bombs, tested on Madre Tierra, that later burned off the faces of Iraqi and American soldiers out in the wild. The soil, the air, the water of Vieques carry the marks of imperial decisions made by white men in dark suits, unimpressed by the agony of a tortured island or its carnival of contamination. Over over 50 years of nonstop bombardments and gunfire of trees, flowers, and birds leave shadows and ashes. The root systems of mangrove swamps carry their tales. That I picked is by an amazing poet named Denise Lowe. And this is from Denise's author's note. On a recent flight over the grasslands where this poem was written, I viewed the circle within square patterns of irrigation sprinklers, the Kansas wheat fields. Below them, the Oglala Aquifer loses the equivalent of 17 Colorado rivers each year. It's just, I'm going to let the poem speak for itself. This is called Buffalo Heads in Diners, a Scattered Herd. At the Cimarron Hotel, a god gazes east through lace curtains. Sun warms his bearded brown bison face. From his closed mouth come prayers. At High Noon Saloon on the shelf, a great sleeping beast dreams among plaques, bowling medals, Coors signs, and bosomy pinups. In Colby, the bull guards whiskey, nostrils flaring, horns lowered, glass eyes shining. He steadies the row of amber bottles. A trophy shoulder mount bust on an outfitter's wall is a beefalo. The monster head glares at hunters, deer, and antelope turn away. At a Santa Fe bar near Custer's farm, never occupied, a stuffed buffalo head whispers in Lakota to Wasiku cowboys the secret of who killed Custer. Thank you.
Warbirds, a descendant of Hannibal's vipers. Its pattern gone to tank tracks is ground into the dust, flattened in an agonistic twist. Bursts of squeak and hiss ride on the monstrous chemical wind. Insects inherit the territory. Malarial mosquitoes, small enough to fly through a rifle sight, hatch in these depleted wetlands. A whine near an orphan horse's ear. She snaps at the unbearable swellings with eroded teeth. Her misshapen hooves catch under a string of barbed wire. Carrion corvids strip the carcass. A moan on the breeze, flailing swamp sparrows drown on the fetid waterline. Warbirds feed on the dying, flick the sparrows into the air, swallow them whole. This second poem is called Collateral. The last wolves hide under the roots of a fallen Aleppo pine. They howl as in unresponsive darkness, mourn the losses of their territory, their mates, their communities. They drink from kerosene streams rainbowed with chemicals, scavenge collateral carcasses, but crave fresh hunted meat. A lost spaniel and a befuddled poodle wander nearby. Recognizing kin, the wolves make overtures. But there is no scent, no fecundity. Everything has been neutered. The wolves drive the dogs to revert, lick them clean, feed them like puppies, then bind them into a yapping feral squad, chasing after the wild boar, snorting in the dirt and pine needles. They starve with full bellies. For all the death that feeds them, they are empty with longing. My author's note: Italians have long held love for the wolf, the mythical mother of the founders of Rome. Perhaps part of why they connect to wolves has to do with the importance of family in Italian culture. Wolves, too, are a communal, and they have a hierarchy relationship within their packs. I believe when wolves are deprived of family, they try to recreate it. There is varying information as to when the last wolves were killed in Italy. Supposedly, the last one was killed in 1946 in a cave in Genoa. During World War II, the wolves' territories were invaded by waves of soldiers. And by the end of the war, the animal's population was decimated, in part through poisonings. In this poem, I imagined the wolves' care of feral domesticated dogs was an expression of longing for the communities the war had destroyed. And that poem was inspired by a story that my father told me about his mother's family, who lived in a small village called Laurino above Salerno. He said it was a very large house. It had 12 rooms, and there was a ground floor. Every night they would bring the animals in into the ground floor, because the wolves would come down from above in the mountains, and they would prey on their animals. And so that's where I got the idea of talking about wolves. Her name is Nguyen Phan Keng Mai. The fish. My mother brought home a fish to celebrate her children's good grades, marked in red ink. My two brothers and I danced in our front yard, barefoot, our tongues excited to taste the sweetness of our favorite dish. After months of eating boiled manioc and water spinach. What's wrong with it? My father pointed at the fish's large head and crooked body. And now all of us could see how my mother could afford this fish. It had gigantic eyes and two tails squirming beneath the scales. My father said he'd learned from a friend that the Agent Orange sprayed into our rivers, lakes, and ponds, had deformed the many living things, fish, eels, turtles. But our tongues were trembling for the taste of a proper meal. Our stomachs yelled for protein, and my mother, who had spent the money, well-earned laboring in the rice field under the hot sun, decided to cook what could be the war's leftover. I don't know if a seed of Agent Orange managed to plant itself in me through the fish, the flesh of the strange-looking fish. But I remember the tenderness of my mother's cooking, spiced with chili and ginger, picked from the garden of her springtime love. The author's note, I'm going to edit it somewhat. I grew up in the Mekong Delta, thank you, an area sprayed by American airplanes during the Vietnam War, and experienced the impact of Agent Orange. The above poem comes from my personal experiences. I also volunteered at orphanages where I worked with victims of Agent Orange. And I kept wondering why humans could cause such suffering to other humans.
What he writes, I'm going to read the author's note first. Without a doubt, the American war in Vietnam caused massive and permanent damage to the flora and fauna of Vietnam. Dioxin poisoning, bomb and artillery craters, the destruction of wildlife on a massive scale. In the grand scheme of things, digging up the surface of the land, as I described here in holes, may have had only a minor and reversible impact. But everywhere we Americans went, we changed the landscape, and not for better. Holes. Out in the boonies of Vietnam while on patrol, night after night, you dig a few, fighting hole. Every night in a different place. Every night another hole, like a grave, but not as deep. On a company sweep, you're talking 250 holes a night. Battalion operation, 1,000 holes a night. Night after night after night. And if you had to take a crap, and everyone did, you dug a little hole and shit in it. We called them cat holes. You also needed to dig a hole for your garbage, mostly sea ration cans, as if you buried your trash, the Viet Cong and the NVA wouldn't know you'd been there. Americans dug these holes for 7 years, more or less. Hundreds of thousands of holes, night after night after night, from the DMZ to the Mekong. That's a lot of holes, a lot of garbage, one hell of a lot of crap.
So this poem is actually more of a personal poem to me because my family is from El Salvador. This is about the Salvadoran Civil War, which lasted about 12 years, starting from 1979 to 1992. So my parents were probably in their early 20s when they came over to the United States. But it was a very brutal time in the history of El Salvador. Namely, the United States Army did train the Salvadoran Army in scorched earth military tactics. So in the early 80s, that was how they were smoking out the leftist guerrilleros hiding in the forests. So it did destroy the countryside completely. Entire towns were destroyed. People obviously were destroyed themselves, and it led to a water crisis that the country is currently facing. So I read an article this morning, as recent as this month, somebody published something on water governance, and that is policies that are just not, that are being completely ignored in El Salvador at this time, even during this administration, which, if you don't know, the president of El Salvador is Nayib Bukele. So this poem is called Café, Iguana, Algodón. There is nowhere to hide if this is nowhere. There will be no more where when white phosphorus ignites and catches inside of the vines that we thought couldn't burn. Phoenix feather only knows wick and wither, while El Torogos shoots out of the smoke. Where there is no water, there is at least one head bobbing. Iguana, donning an ash veil, laying infertile eggs, waiting for another drop of rain to flow into tributary veins. It survived the attack today, but is famine's best meat. Tomorrow, drain the basin, said the general who, like Isaac, dropped an apple and witnessed gravity assisting a weapon. The crime against the object it happened to. the breeze it offers before exploding. Burn the heavenly body, said the lieutenant colonel who could believe in the science and the execution of bombs. The balsa tree joined the cause before the colonel was ever born, but remained oblivious to doom until it caught fire. Some eyes were gazing up at the giant bullets as they were falling. First bullet to take everything, another to start from no thing, another to make the volcano crumble, another to silence the cawing alarm, the lonely coo, crying, another to cause another to fail to mother that smothered generation in the soil dry. They said it's been ill for a very long time, and El Torogos must continue to drink from the dirty puddle. Is by Maider Bang, and it's titled Era of Retreat. And I don't want to butcher the context of this poem because I thought it was so beautiful. Something that really called out to me with this poem as well is the questions, the two questions that are at the center. And I didn't read it for mine, but I also had a question at the center of my poem, so I'm just going to go back for one moment. And that question was, how is it that both the Salvadoreño and Torogos must still suffer the consequences of explosions from 44 years ago? Right, so that was my question, and I just felt this kinship with Maider Bang's poem. The saola is a highly rare and critically endangered animal endemic to the Annamite Mountains between Laos and Vietnam. As a Hmong American poet, I've long thought about saola's connection in the U.S. wars in Southeast Asia, specifically the secret war in Laos, when the CIA and the U.S. government coerced and then used Hmong boys and men to fight and die for the American campaign against communism. Hmong soldiers fought long and grim battles in northern Laos while also rescuing downed American pilots, disrupting traffic on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and gathering intelligence. When the Americans could no longer sustain the war, they withdrew in 1975 and abandoned the Hmong people to their fate. The story of the Hmong people, becoming refugees, reminds me of saola's tenuous existence in a landscape ravaged by a history of war. While the largest threat to saola has been snaring and poaching as bycatch, the animal has also been impacted by loss of habitat. Conservationists estimate there are fewer than 100 remaining, although it's possible that saola could already be extinct. So this is Era of Retreat. War closes down a country where an animal occurred without anyone's need to know it was occurring. No one came and went where the animal lived, near munitions under cover, where it lived, orphaned by taxonomy, where it lived beside foliage, sprayed with chemicals, where it lived rugged and remote, in a refuge of shaded streambeds, mineral licks and highlands along steep edges and higher reaches of rocky springs. No outsiders, nothing of the nameless alive in these woods, nothing of this mammal inside hollows. Small caves curving to the shape, with horns perfected. In a scene of the world before ice. No one to study a wilderness, kept in quiet. How much scenery can we catalog before we make it endangered? How does war kill an animal, even as war leaves the animal alone, to flee, to hide, to shelter, to roam, to gather, to breed, forcing the animal farther, terra incognita? Farther, where bombs flower, into a feral thrive. Farther, into untouched hiding, an animal hunkers down. Thank you.
I want to read a poem by Gara Moral, who lives in California, but this poem focuses on the destruction in Gaza. And this is what Gara wrote. The destruction of Gaza, the land has become a wasteland of rubble. In my poem, Seeds, I convey the perspective of a Palestinian longing for the beauty the land once held. Amidst their grief, there remains a steadfast confidence in the land's resilience. The seeds symbolize a belief that beauty will return despite the current devastation. This poem embodies Palestinian resistance, hope, and trust in the land's ability to regenerate. The emphasis on seeds resonates with the powerful quote by Dionysius Christianopoulos, quote, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds." Seeds. I found myself longing for things I used to have, for things I used to see growing out of the ground and falling from the trees. Sounds of bumblebees, butterflies visiting every dream. I used to swim smoothly with my arms beneath the sea. Now, so many bodies floating next to me. Bullet shells and babies, burnt farms and stolen history. Fires unleashed onto my home. The seeds were the only thing that made me feel less alone. Every bush ripped out of my soul, a flower would grow from the seeds that I offered back to the soil. They were the only hope for future growth after so much turmoil. The forest of Servellon. Say that word again in French.
Verdun.
Oh man, Verdun. When the guns stopped, silence covered the obliterated farms, fields, the villages of Verdun. Damage to agriculture, 100%. Some of the wasted land stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border, farming has reclaimed. Some of the land is called Zone Rouge, too toxic to use, too expensive to clean. The Zone Rouge looks much as it did a century ago. So you see what war does to land. Who knows where the unexploded shells lie? All over. In the 20s, authorities burned all they found. Arsenic saturates the soil. Demining continues in La Place Gas. As war reparation, Germany planted pines from the Black Forest. Reparation, reparative, meaning to fix, to make amends, or OBS, reconciliation. In the OED, the first quote dates from the 100 Years' War. Full axiom for reparation. Oist and trespass, don within per fossade lande, 1421. The pines have grown the land. The pines have grown the land green. The forest of Verdun parries the war's ghosts. It makes you think. And underground, the mycelial fungal tangle reconciles waste, repairs.
And this is called A Day After. And it was written long ago when they were first trying to sell us on nuclear war, like, oh, well, the day after everything will be fine. You know, there'll be a little recovery, but then we'll start making money again. That starts off with a fuse lighting. Swah, boom. Swah, boom. Post-war boom won't be a post-war boom the day after. The day after, it'll be night. It'll be night forever the day after, a long night, a dark night, a cold night, a winter night, a nuclear winter-cold war with no winners, no heat, no life, no love, no welcome back soldier, ice age cavemen battling with clubs for hip bones and soup cans and tampons and soda crackers and dehydrated water. The living will envy the dead. Push the button, light the fuse. Psst, boom. This won't hurt a bit. What happens in the final hour will take but a minute, and there won't be a second chance. The day after, the president, out of martinis and air and executive bomb shelters, will emerge from the rubble, movies in his eyes. We've won, the world is ours, a kingdom of ashes. Ivanka was the Golf course damaged? What are the ratings? And then they'll feel it. The boom of a war economy recovery. His voice will thud and muffle against radioactive silence, and he will collapse under a boom of darkened rain, a boom of ice and bugs, a boom of frozen kids, a boom of voiceless shortwaves hissing, come in, come in, come in. And in a gloomy, hollow, nothing boom of doom, his hair will fall out at high noon. Boom. He'll reach for his 6 guns, but there'll be no one left to shoot for it. Cut, 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 he'll yell, an understatement in the dark. The day after, it'll be night, forever, space, black, eternity, night. The humble returns on our investment in death. And other planets will be banning bombs, and banning war, and taking notes, and filming as we whiz past them at 186,000 miles per second. Psh, swah, boom. If there is poetry in my book about the sea, it is not because I deliberately put it in there, but because no one could write truthfully about the sea and leave out the poetry.